So welcome to Using Landscape Layers. By the end of this video, you will have a very simple visual metaphor of a landscape with some very unrealistic grass and dirt, but you will have learnt how to actually set up landscape materials which are multi-layered. I'll just show you the end result. We're going to create a blueprint that looks something like that. This is a 2-layered material, and then we're going to learn how to paint it onto the landscape. So let's dive in and see that work. Okay, let's get this landscape painting done. You can either follow me through or you can wait until the challenge about midway through where I will recap on the challenge slide the 6 major steps. So it's up to you which way you do things. Do let me know in the Q&A, by the way, whether you prefer to follow me through or just to watch me and then to have enough details on the challenge slide to complete the challenge without needing to be doing it as you go along in the video. Just let me know which you prefer. So let's go. What we do in the content tab is make ourselves a new material because the landscape's going to need a material. I'm going to simply call it landscape. Going to go into the material, and then the next thing we need is it must be a layered material. So we go into landscape as a category, and we want landscape layer blend. Okay, it adds a layer blend node to the landscape. What that allows us to do is have multiple different things feeding into the base color of the landscape. In our case, we're just going to have green for grass and just a browny color for dirt, but you could have snow colors, you could have all sorts of things, you could have textures, any complex materials can be blended in here. We're just going to start with plain colors for now. Okay, so that's the layer blend node. Also, if you click on the landscape node, there's going to be an item for you to set, which is under usage. You've got used with landscape. Again, they're both on the challenge slide. So that sets it as a landscape material, which means that it doesn't accept more than one indirect bounce of light for optimization. And it also makes various other behind the scenes changes, which make it suitable for landscapes. Okay, so we've set the landscape node as a used as landscape. And then the layer blend node, we need to start creating layers on, because at the moment we have no inputs to this node. So I'm going to create a layer called grass. And then another layer in the Details tab, in the Layers, where it says 0 or 1 elements, you add another element, and we're just going to call that Dirt. Fantastic. So how do we set the colors of these? Well, they're accepting an input. What do we want to put in there? Well, we want a color, and the way to do that is to look for something called a vector parameter. And that's one way to do it, vector parameter. It adds a vector parameter node. Again, that's on the challenge slide. You take the white overall parameter, it's a 4-element parameter, RGB and alpha, which is the transparency. That's all combined into that white node. You pop that into the grass, and then go ahead and set the grass as a greeny color. Now, I'm just going to exit Steam because I don't want to be hearing about other people playing games, and then add another node. So a way of adding a node is to hold, another way of adding this vector parameter node is to hold down V, and then to click in the map. So that gets you a vector parameter mode, holding down V and just clicking. Wire that one up to dirt and then go and set its color. And there we go. So what that is now is it's made the landscape material a 2-layered material, and the landscape itself is set for use as a landscape type. So that's all we've done so far. Let's go ahead and save the material. So we've created a material, set the usage, added a landscape layer blend mode, and added a couple of vector parameters. Now we're going to actually add the layer information. Let me show you what that means. If we go into the Modes tab, back to the landscape, and then where we want to go into Paint, it's saying Target Layers here, and we don't actually have currently any target layers to paint on. Well, that's because we haven't actually assigned this material to the landscape yet. So you go to the World Outliner, find the landscape, then where it's asking for the landscape material, let's give it the material we just created. So now the landscape has the material we just made. Back in the Paint option of the Modes tab, where it says Target Layers, look, there are our layers. Now we're nearly there. We can't quite paint with them yet. Why not? Well, let's try. The layer has no layer info. You must create or assign a layer info. A layer info is basically a map of where this paint is going to go. So you click a little plus here. Sometimes it's a little bit buggy actually in this 4.11 version. So let me just see if I can get it to behave. Off, back into Paint, and then it's the plus sign you want to click there. Create layer info. Weight blended. We want blended layers. We're not going to bother with non-weight blended. That's more advanced. Let it just give it's going to create a folder, and let's just let it use the default name, grass layer info, nice and clear. Let's go back and make another layer info for the dirt. So those two assets it's just created, if we look in the contents, are in a folder called Battleground Shared Assets, and they are basically maps of where this stuff's going to end up. Cool, so with all those steps in place, we're now able to come along and say, right, let's zoom out a little bit. I'm just going to unlock my mouse wheel, there you go. Okay, cool. Zoom out, pick yourself a brush size, so quite large in my case, and then just start painting it in. Okay, so that's how you would paint the grass. Now remember, you can roll the mouse wheel up to move faster. And then the other thing that we need to be painting, of course, is the dirt, which I'm going to do with a much smaller brush. And you can, now, if you get this type of artifact, just wait for the lighting to recompile. There you go. So back down to dirt. So if you're having any trouble painting like this, then you need to think about A, your brush size, B, the brush fall off. So if there's no fall off, then we are painting purely with the new color. And then if there's maximum fall off, then we have a blend between the two colors. But the reason we're having trouble here is because our tool strength is so low. If we're painting with dirt and we want dirt to override everything, we need our tool strength to be very high. So with the 0 brush fall off and a maximum tool strength, look what happens. Everywhere it touches, it puts pure dirt, you see? And if we turn the target strength down, then what happens is we end up with the green in potentially showing through depending on where it has cached into. It's slightly messy the way that it arrives. So you want a pretty strong brush all the time here, certainly for this pass. There's a whole art to painting landscapes, right? And all we want to do for the moment is show you that this is a multi-layered texture and that you can paint it on. So I'm going to finish this off after the challenge. I want you to paint your landscape. Create a material for your landscape if you haven't done it already. Set the usage used with landscape on the materials node. Set the landscape layer, well, add in a landscape layer blend node and use vector parameters to set at least a couple of colors. As I said, add at least 2 layers and create their layer infos. Remember, when you come back out and go into the modes tab, we're going to need to create layer infos so it knows what layer goes where on the map. Then paint the landscape from the modes tab and screenshot and share with us. So go ahead, pause the video and get your landscape working now. Welcome back. So I'm just going to very rough and ready get this landscape going. By the way, one problem you may have is in the lee of these hills, there's not enough light. So the way that I'm going to combat that very quickly is to come to modes and then across to lights. I'm going to add a directional light. Now it turns out it doesn't matter where in the scene a directional light sits. All that matters is its rotation. So rotate it round till it fills in the shadows a little bit for you. And then you can turn its intensity all the way down till it's a subtle fill in effect. And then I'm going to move the light out the way so it's not annoying me. So let's just move that right out, say underneath the world, or if that's irritating to you, you can move it right up in the air. Okay, so that's a way of just being able to see what's going on in these hills. Now it's just a question of probably first painting the hills with the brown. And as I say, you could go ahead and make a third material in here and make a white for snow if you wanted to. But I'm going to do a really rough landscape to start with so that we can iterate rapidly around our circle and get on with the tank and then come back and revisit the landscape and repeat. So making sure I have a strong tool but also no brush fall off so that I can just put this on the mountains. I can go ahead and paint. Now there are ways that you can do this based on height of terrain, which is possible and fine as well. But for now, I just want to go ahead and do a really simple painting just of the hills just to differentiate them, assuming the grass isn't growing on the hills. I'm going to do the hills first, and only what matters from the ground level. If it's not visible from the ground level, it doesn't really matter, which is why I'm doing it from down here, right? And I'm going to paint them. Now this also landscape could be a nice low poly landscape, which we could achieve by turning our number of quads all the way down. It's a little harder to work with low poly in a way because the tooling isn't completely default set up for it. So I'm not going to cover low poly right now. But if you're really keen to know, well, look, I want to make a simple landscape here and not go for anything too real, and I want to know how to do a low poly, then let me know, and I will look to potentially introduce that a little bit later. But for now, I'm trying to give you the more general landscape tools, which is that you can work with any landscape. And this stuff can be a little bit laborious. You just paint it on. There's a lot more we can do with different layer modes, with different brush types, etc., etc. We can tag things by height, yada, yada. But the idea is that you just need to get the feel for painting landscape from where you're standing. Obviously, this landscape's too glossy. We can sort that out later. It's reflecting too much sun. It doesn't look like grass at all because there's no image material in it. We can add images in, it's not a problem. You need to add another node inside the blueprint editor, and we'll iterate on the landscape as we go, as I say. The purpose for now is just to get something really simple down so that we have a landscape that is a metaphor, a visual metaphor for the type of landscape that we ultimately are going to want. Now that may be a photoreal landscape, or it may be a really simple landscape like this one. That's entirely up to you. Now I think from ground level the tank is not going to be able to see that, so I'm going to come down a bit using my WSA&D and just only paint what we're going to be able to see. Now I'm bound to have left some bits, but that's absolutely fine for now. I'm just going to roll out. I've got one of these mouse wheels. You can click a button. It's a Logitech, and you can free the mouse wheel, which is pretty handy. And then I'm very roughly now, with some brush fall off, going to just paint the edges, the grass now. Now the potential problem with the brush fall off is on the inside of that brush, we're going to get a little bit of dirt color painted, but we can then come along with a brush with no fall off, and we can sort that out later on. Also, when we're painting with actual textured materials, we're going to have a different type of node in the blueprint, which is going to control something called a UV map, which you haven't seen yet, and then that'll allow us to be a lot more controlled with this. But for now, this works absolutely fine. So now I'm going to go to a high tool strength, but no brush fall off, and a very, very large tool, and just fill the grass in the middle, taking out any of those little problems we had with the green. And really for now, I just want a flat, if you make a mistake, Control Z, by the way, make a really flat messer, if you like, a table landscape area, so that we can get our tank movement working on a piece of flat ground without worrying about it getting stuck on things, etc. That's good. So we're done. Go down to the ground level, have a quick look around. Of course, we're moving relatively slowly because it is a big terrain, and this has given us a simple visual metaphor of a terrain, and that's all we're looking for.